The Millionaire's Secret Bride, the hotel heiress who changed everything. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support truly means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. At the edge of a quiet seaside town stood Eden Bay Hotel, a century-old landmark once filled with music, laughter, and guests dressed in elegance. But now, its marble halls echoed with silence, its gardens overgrown, and its future uncertain. Among the staff who still believed in its soul was Lillian Rosewood, a young woman with calm brown eyes and a determination that could soften even the harshest storm. No one knew that behind her gentle smile was the heir to a forgotten legacy, the granddaughter of the hotel's original founder. That morning, the sea fog rolled over the glass terrace when a black luxury car arrived. Stepping out was Ethan Cole, the self-made millionaire known for rescuing failing hotels, only to sell them again for profit. His eyes were sharp, his suit immaculate, and his expression unreadable. To him, everything in life could be calculated, negotiated, or purchased. Love, loyalty, even marriage, nothing was beyond the reach of a contract. Inside the dim meeting room, he placed a file on the table in front of Lillian. "This," he said, his voice calm but cold, "is an offer of partnership, but for the public, it will appear as marriage." Lillian stared at the gold letters embossed on the document, "Contract of Temporary Marriage." Her hands trembled slightly. "A marriage?" she repeated softly. Ethan leaned back in his chair. "The board of Cole Holdings wants stability before we acquire this hotel. They need to see a man who can be trusted, one who has roots, a family image. I need a wife on paper. You need time to save Eden Bay. We both get what we want." His words were precise, like a deal closing in an executive suite. For a moment, Lillian wanted to refuse. Yet the memory of her father, ill and fragile in the small apartment above the staff quarters, pulled her back. She thought of the people who had worked there their whole lives, the gardeners, the maids, the cooks who still believed Eden Bay could shine again. If signing her name could buy them hope, perhaps it was worth the cost. She lifted her chin. "All right, Mr. Cole, but only for 1 year." A faint smile appeared on Ethan's lips, not of joy, but of control. "1 year is all I need." As the pen touched paper, thunder rumbled across the bay. Outside, a few rose petals drifted through the open window, the scent of the ancient Rosewood Garden filling the room. It was said those roses had been planted by Lillian's grandmother, blooms the size of soup bowls, carrying the fragrance of another time. For Lillian, they were not only flowers, but memories, proof that love could endure even when the world turned cold. Ethan glanced toward the garden. "Beautiful place," he murmured. "A pity it is dying." Lillian looked up, meeting his gaze. "It is not dying," she said quietly. "It is waiting for someone to care again." For a brief second, something in Ethan's eyes flickered an echo of warmth quickly buried under years of ambition. He closed the folder and stood. "We start tomorrow. The press will believe our wedding is real. From now on, you are Mrs. Cole." As he walked away, Lillian's reflection lingered on the glass door, half in shadow, half in light. She wondered what she had truly agreed to. A contract of survival, or the beginning of something neither could predict. Outside, waves crashed gently against the shore, carrying with them the whisper of destiny. The roses swayed in the wind, their petals glimmering under the pale sunlight, as if they already knew this was not just a deal, it was the first chapter of a story that would change both their lives forever. The morning after the contract was signed, Eden Bay Hotel looked almost alive again. Workers moved along the terrace, cleaning the dust from the old chandeliers and polishing the marble floors. For the first time in months, laughter returned to the corridors, cautious but real. And in the middle of that quiet rebirth stood Lillian Rosewood, now officially Mrs. Cole. Her reflection in the mirror hardly looked different, yet everything had changed. She was no longer just the manager of a struggling seaside hotel. She was the temporary wife of Ethan Cole, a man whose every decision shaped empires. The thought of it still felt unreal. She touched the ring he had given her for the sake of appearances, a simple gold band that caught the light like a secret. When Ethan arrived that morning, he carried the same composure as always, precise, efficient, and unreadable. He reviewed the renovation plans, spoke briefly to the staff, and moved through the lobby as if the world belonged to him. Everyone whispered about the miracle wedding that had saved Eden Bay. No one knew the truth, that the marriage was a contract, sealed with signatures, not vows. After the meeting, Ethan approached Lillian near the grand staircase. "I will be staying in the West Wing," he said, checking his watch. "We will keep our schedules aligned for the press events. The first interview is on Friday." She nodded, trying to steady her voice. "Understood. The staff will handle the arrangements." He looked at her for a moment, then added quietly, "Remember, Mrs. Cole, image is everything. We have to convince them this is real." When he left, the scent of the Rosewood Garden drifted through the air, rich, sweet, and heavy with memories. Lillian stepped outside, following the path lined with climbing vines. The garden stretched along the hillside, overlooking the sea. Dozens of rose bushes bloomed in every shade of pink and cream, their petals the size of small bowls, glowing under the soft sunlight. This place had always been her sanctuary, the only place that still carried her family's touch. As she walked among the roses, she noticed an old plaque hidden under the ivy. "To love is to rebuild what time tried to destroy." It was her grandmother's handwriting. She knelt to clean the rusted metal, feeling a sting in her eyes. The world had taken everything from her family, their name, their fortune, their legacy, but it could not take this garden. It was alive, just like the truth she still hid. That night, the hotel hosted a private dinner for investors. The dining hall glowed with candlelight and soft piano music. Ethan played his role flawlessly, greeting guests, smiling at cameras, his hand resting lightly on Lillian's back. To the crowd, they were the perfect couple, charming, elegant, enviable, but beneath the surface, tension simmered. During dessert, one of the guests, an older woman in pearls, leaned toward Lillian. "My dear, your last name sounds familiar. Are you related to the Rosewood family who built this hotel?" The question froze the air. Lillian forced a polite smile. "Just a coincidence, I suppose." Ethan's eyes flicked toward her, sharp and curious. Later, when the guests left, he found her standing alone by the garden doors. "You lied to her," he said evenly. "I did not lie," she replied softly. "I simply chose silence." He studied her face, his tone unreadable. "There is more to you than you want me to see. I can feel it." Her heart pounded. "And what if there is? Then I will find out." The sound of the sea filled the silence between them. For the first time, Lillian sensed something shift inside Ethan, a crack in the armor he wore. His voice, usually detached, had a note of curiosity, maybe even admiration. But before she could say anything, he turned and walked away. Later that night, Lillian wandered back into the garden. The moonlight poured over the roses, silvering their edges. She remembered how her grandmother used to say that these flowers bloomed only for those who truly loved this place. She wondered if the roses could sense her secret, or the danger that came with it. Far across the bay, in a high-rise office filled with shadows, another man watched a news clip of Ethan and Lillian's wedding. Richard Hale, vice president of Cole Holdings, smiled faintly as he paused the video. "So, Ethan," he whispered to himself, "you finally found someone worth risking everything for. Let us see how long your perfect marriage lasts." The camera flash from the television lit his face for a brief second, calm, confident, but with something darker behind his eyes. And as the roses swayed under the moonlight back at Eden Bay, their beauty hid a truth that neither Lillian nor Ethan could yet imagine. The real battle for love and legacy was only beginning. The days that followed were filled with carefully staged appearances. Every morning, Lillian and Ethan stood side by side for photographs in the hotel's grand hall. They smiled for cameras, exchanged polite gestures, and pretended to be a couple united by love rather than bound by paper. Yet behind the flash of lights and elegant gowns, both of them carried secrets neither dared to share. To the world, their partnership looked flawless. To Lillian, it was exhausting. Each lie whispered to the press felt heavier than the last. She would return to her small office after the interviews, remove her heels, and look out the window toward the sea. The waves kept breaking against the rocks, steady and relentless, just like her fear that everything could crumble if the truth came out. One evening, Ethan joined her after the reporters had gone. He loosened his tie, his expression unreadable. "You handled that question well," he said. "About how we met." She turned toward him, surprised by the faint trace of warmth in his tone. "It was not hard. We both know how to make a story sound believable." "And," He studied her for a moment, then asked, "You have a talent for hiding, Mrs. Cole. Where did you learn that?" Her voice softened. From a lifetime of pretending everything is fine. For the first time, he did not have an answer. He simply looked at her as though seeing her differently, as though wondering what kind of pain could make a woman so calm. That fragile connection might have grown, but fate had other plans. 3 days later, an article appeared online titled "The Hidden Heiress of Eden Bay." The headline spread like wildfire. It revealed that Lillian Rosewood was not a random hotel manager, but the last surviving member of the Rosewood family, the same family that had once owned Eden Bay Hotel before it collapsed in scandal a decade earlier. The source of the leak was unknown, but Ethan had his suspicions. In the boardroom that morning, Richard Hale watched the chaos unfold with quiet satisfaction. He held a copy of the article, his voice calm as ever. "This is a serious breach of trust," he said. "If the media discovers that your wife hid her identity, investors may assume you knew." Ethan's jaw tightened. "I will handle it." Richard smiled faintly. "Of course you will. Just remember, perception is everything. Once doubt begins, it rarely stops." Oh. Later that day, Ethan confronted Lillian in the lobby. The hotel was quiet, the staff too nervous to meet their eyes. "Why did you hide this from me?" His voice was low but edged with anger. Lillian's heart pounded. "Because you would have never signed that contract if you had known who I am." He stepped closer. "You are right. I do not mix business with sentiment." The words stung sharper than any accusation. She drew in a breath, steady but trembling. "Everything I did was to save this place. The people who work here, they depend on it. You of all people should understand what it means to fight for something you love." His expression hardened. "I do not love anything that cannot be controlled." For a long moment, they stood in silence. Then Ethan turned away, leaving her standing in the center of the lobby, surrounded by the soft scent of roses. That night, rain swept over Eden Bay. Lillian walked alone through the garden, her white coat clinging to her shoulders, her hair damp with mist. The roses glistened under the storm, petals trembling but refusing to fall. She knelt beside one of the oldest bushes, her grandmother's favorite, and whispered, "I tried to protect you, but maybe I have only made things worse." At that same hour, miles away in his penthouse office, Richard Hale looked out at the city lights. His reflection in the window was calm, almost peaceful. On his desk lay a folder marked Cole Holdings Confidential. Inside were documents proving that 10 years ago, he had been the one who manipulated the Rosewood family's downfall. He traced a finger over Lillian's name and smiled. "Ethan never learned what I did," he murmured, "but he will." The thunder rolled across the sky, as if warning that the past was coming back for everyone who had tried to bury it. Back at Eden Bay, Ethan stood by his window, staring into the rain. For the first time, he felt something he could not define: anger, guilt, maybe regret. The image of Lillian's eyes, hurt but unbroken, would not leave his mind. He told himself it was only business, but deep down, he knew the truth. Somewhere between the lies and the contract, something real had begun. And now, it might be too late to save it. The storm that struck Eden Bay that night seemed to wash away whatever illusion remained between Ethan and Lillian. By morning, the entire town had seen the headline. Reporters crowded the gates, drones hovered above the property, and every gossip column speculated about the marriage built on lies. Inside the hotel, Ethan faced a storm of his own. Investors demanded answers. The board threatened to suspend his position, and Richard Hale played the part of a loyal advisor offering calm solutions. "You should make a public statement," Richard suggested smoothly. "Distance yourself from her before this ruins everything." Ethan's response was quiet but sharp. "I will decide what to do." When he finally found Lillian, she was in the rose garden, tending to the rain-soaked blooms, as if nothing else in the world existed. Her white blouse was damp from the mist, her hands covered with soil as she tried to lift a fallen stem. The roses, large and heavy with water, bent toward the ground like tired hearts. "Do you really think this helps?" Ethan asked, his tone clipped. Lillian looked up. "Someone has to take care of what is still alive." He stepped closer, frustration flickering in his eyes. "Do you not understand the damage you have caused? Everything we built, the trust of my company, my name." She stood, meeting his gaze. "You built your life on control, Ethan. I built mine on hope. I will not apologize for wanting to protect this place." For a long moment, neither spoke. The sound of waves filled the silence. Then Ethan's voice dropped, quieter, more wounded than angry. You should have told me. Her reply was almost a whisper. Would you have listened? The truth hung between them like fog. Ethan turned and walked away, but something in him shifted. He had seen real fear in her eyes, not the fear of losing money, but the fear of losing meaning. That evening, he sat alone in his office, overlooking the bay. The power flickered from the storm, and the reflection of his own face stared back at him through the window. On the desk lay the original contract, the one he had written to bind her. It looked smaller now, meaningless. For years, his world had been measured in profit and numbers. But tonight, for the first time, those numbers felt empty. A soft knock broke the silence. It was his assistant, carrying a stack of files. Sir, these are from Richard Hale's department financial audits from the last quarter. He asked for your signature. Ethan nodded absently. When the assistant left, he glanced at the folder and noticed something strange. The documents were marked Eden Bay Acquisition 2014, the year the Rosewood family lost everything. His brows furrowed. Why would Richard still have access to those files? He opened the first page. The numbers did not add up. Transactions looped through offshore accounts, signed under a code that looked hauntingly familiar, one of Richard's old authorization tags. A chill ran through him. He flipped through the papers faster. The pattern repeated hidden transfers, falsified losses, and final signatures that all led back to the same hand. It was not the Rosewoods who had destroyed themselves. Someone else had pulled the strings from behind the curtain. That someone had been Richard. Ethan leaned back, shock settling into disbelief. The betrayal burned deeper than he expected. Richard was not just his colleague, he had been raised alongside him, trusted like a brother. And now, the truth unfolded like a blade. Meanwhile, down in the garden, Lillian sat on the stone bench, unaware of the discovery. The wind had died, but the air was still heavy with salt. She remembered her grandmother's words, "The roses will bloom again when the truth returns to light." The Bouet. Back in his office, Ethan closed the folder, his decision forming like a storm on the horizon. He finally understood everything, the fall of the Rosewood family, the guilt his father carried before he died, the reason Richard had been erased from the will. He whispered to himself, "It was you all along." When he rose from his chair, his reflection in the window seemed different. The man who had lived by contracts was gone, replaced by one who finally saw what mattered. He walked out of the office, the folder in his hand, and headed toward the garden where Lillian sat beneath the moonlight. She looked up as he approached, sensing the change in his stride. For the first time, there was no distance in his eyes. He stood before her and said quietly, "I need to tell you something about the past and about who your real enemy is." The roses swayed gently as if listening, their petals glistening with dew. The night around them felt alive again, heavy with unspoken promises. For the first time since their false wedding, the word real meant something neither could deny. The morning sun rose over Eden Bay with an uneasy glow. The storm had passed, but the air still carried the weight of everything that had been broken. Lillian stood near the window of her small suite, watching the mist drift over the sea. She had not slept. Her hands were still stained with soil from the roses she had tried to save the night before. A soft knock sounded on the door. When she opened it, Ethan was standing there, holding the same folder he had found in his office, the one filled with documents that could change everything. His expression was different now. The cold precision in his eyes had been replaced by something deeper, almost haunted. "We need to talk," he said quietly. They sat in the small parlor overlooking the garden. The roses below were still glistening with dew, the morning light reflecting off each petal. Ethan placed the folder on the table between them. "These files came from Richard's department," he began. "They contain proof that your family did not cause the collapse of the Rosewood estate. It was orchestrated. The same signatures appear across multiple accounts, Richard's signatures. He was behind the scandal 10 years ago." Lillian's breath caught in her throat. "Richard? That cannot be true. He was only an associate back then." "He was more than that," Ethan said. "He was my father's adopted son, my brother in everything but blood, and I trusted him completely." Silence fell. Outside, the waves struck the rocks with a slow, steady rhythm, like the beating of a distant heart. "I did not know," Ethan continued, his voice lower now. "My father must have discovered what he had done. That is why he erased Richard from the will before he died. But no one else knew the truth, until now." Lillian's eyes filled with tears that she tried to hold back. You mean all this time, my family was innocent? We were destroyed for nothing? Ethan nodded, his voice heavy. For greed, for ambition, and for revenge. She turned toward the window, her reflection trembling in the glass. The truth she had carried like a curse was finally undone, but it brought no peace, only a hollow ache. She whispered, then all this pain, all these years, it was because of him. Or, Ethan reached across the table, his hand hovering near hers. I am sorry. For everything. For not believing you. For letting my pride blind me to what mattered. You deserved honesty, not suspicion. She looked at him, her voice unsteady. And what happens now? He met her gaze. Now we end this. Together. For the first time since their contract began, there was no pretense between them. The line between obligation and emotion blurred, replaced by something unspoken but undeniable. Later that afternoon, Ethan gathered his legal team. He ordered a full audit of Cole Holdings and restricted Richard's access to all accounts. No one is to contact him until I say otherwise, he instructed firmly. The team exchanged uneasy glances. Richard had always been untouchable, calm, powerful, and feared. By evening, news spread that an emergency board meeting would be held in 2 days. The official reason was a change in leadership structure, but everyone sensed the tension underneath. As night fell, Ethan returned to the garden. He found Lillian standing among the roses again, her hair lifted by the ocean breeze. She did not turn when he approached. Do you ever wonder, she said softly, why life brings us back to the places we tried to leave behind? Ethan looked at her, his voice quiet but sure. Maybe it is because we are meant to rebuild them. She turned to face him, and for a long moment they simply stood there, surrounded by the scent of roses and the sound of the sea. The distance between them felt smaller now, as if the truth had stripped away everything false. Ethan reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the contract, the one that had once defined them. He unfolded it slowly. This is what started all of it, he said. A paper deal built on lies. Lillian's eyes glistened in the fading light. Then let it end the same way it began by choice. He tore the document in half, then again, until it was nothing but fragments drifting into the wind. The pieces scattered across the rose garden, settling among the petals like ashes of the past. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Ethan said, You are not my contract anymore, Lillian. You never were. You are the reason. I finally see what love really means. The last of the sunlight touched her face, turning her tears into gold. In that quiet space between heartbreak and forgiveness, the hidden heiress of Eden Bay finally stopped hiding, and for the first time, both of them felt free. 2 nights later, the grand ballroom of Cole Holdings gleamed under crystal chandeliers, prepared for what was supposed to be a quiet shareholders meeting. But everyone in the room could feel the storm coming. Whispers echoed along the marble walls, names passed between nervous investors, and cameras waited outside the doors for any sign of scandal. Ethan stood near the window overlooking the city, the file of evidence clutched in his hand. The same documents that had proven Lillian's innocence were now the weapon he would use to expose Richard Hale. He could hear the low hum of voices behind him, his board members gathering, his company watching. Across the room, Richard entered with his usual calm confidence, wearing a tailored suit and his familiar faint smile. He looked every inch the man in control. Ethan, he greeted smoothly, I was beginning to think you might not show. I would not miss this, Ethan replied, his voice steady. Richard glanced at the folder. You look tense. Is something wrong? Only that I finally understand why my father erased you from the will, Ethan said quietly. The room went still. Richard's smile faltered for the briefest second. Be careful with your words. Accusations from a man under pressure can sound desperate. I am not desperate, Ethan said. Just done pretending. He opened the folder and spread the documents across the table. The board members leaned in, eyes widening as they recognized signatures, transaction logs, and hidden transfers linking Richard to the collapse of the Rosewood estate 10 years earlier. Those papers are forged, Richard said sharply. You expect them to believe I destroyed a family just to take their hotel? Ethan met his eyes. Not just any family. You targeted them because you knew my father loved the Rosewoods. You wanted to punish him, to punish me, for being his real son. Gasps rippled across the room. Richard's composure began to crack. He took a step forward, his voice trembling with restrained rage. Do you think you were the only one he loved? He made me part of this family, then threw me aside like a servant. I built half this empire while you played the perfect heir. Ethan's voice lowered. And for that, you destroyed people who never hurt you. You ruined lives to fill the hole in your own heart. For a moment, the two men stood inches apart, the adopted son and the heir, the past and the present colliding under the weight of years of silence. I should have been the one, Richard whispered, his mask fully gone. The one to inherit, the one to be chosen. And you were, Ethan said quietly, you were my brother, until you decided that was not enough. Security officers entered the room as the lead attorney stepped forward. Mr. Hale, he announced formally, there is a warrant for your arrest based on the financial evidence provided by Mr. Cole. Richard froze. His eyes darted from the papers to Ethan, disbelief and fury mixing into one final glare. You think this makes you the hero? You will lose everything too. This company will never trust you again. Ethan did not flinch. Then I will rebuild it, just like she rebuilt her life after what you did. As Richard was escorted out, the room fell into heavy silence. Ethan exhaled for the first time in hours, his hand tightening around the folder until the paper edges cut into his skin. Later that evening, he returned to Eden Bay. The air smelled of salt and roses. The lights of the hotel glowed softly across the hillside, and, for the first time, it felt like home. Lillian waited for him in the garden. She could tell by his expression that it was over. It is done, isn't it? She asked. Yes, he said. Richard is gone. The truth is finally free. She touched his arm gently. And you? Are you free too? He looked out toward the ocean. Not yet, but I am learning how. And they walked together along the garden path, past the fountain where water sparkled in the moonlight. The roses, heavy with blossoms, seemed to bow toward them, their fragrance sweet and forgiving. Ethan stopped and turned to her. You once told me this place was not dying, that it was waiting for someone to care again. You were right, and it was not just a hotel. It was me. Lillian smiled, her eyes warm and steady. Then let us care for it together. For the first time, Ethan's guarded expression softened completely. The sea breeze carried the faint sound of music from the ballroom, and the light from the hotel windows danced across their faces. As they stood surrounded by roses, the weight of betrayal began to fade. What remained was something real, something that neither contract nor deception could destroy. And somewhere deep inside Ethan Cole, the man who once believed love was just another transaction, began to believe, truly, in forgiveness. The next morning, the headlines spread across every business network in the country. Vice President Richard Hale arrested for corporate fraud. The story broke faster than anyone expected. Reporters surrounded the Cole Holdings building. Investors demanded statements, and the name Eden Bay suddenly became a symbol of both scandal and redemption. Ethan spent the morning in his office, giving press interviews and reassuring his staff. The cameras captured his calm tone, his confident presence, but they did not see the exhaustion behind his eyes. For him, this was not victory. It was justice, mixed with grief, the kind that leaves scars instead of satisfaction. By afternoon, he received a call from the district attorney's office. Richard wanted to see him. It was unusual, but Ethan agreed. He needed closure. At the detention center, the guard led him through cold metal doors into a small visiting room. Richard sat at the table, still wearing the same composure he had always used to hide the chaos inside. When he looked up, there was no anger in his eyes, only a strange, calm, almost regretful. I knew you would come, Richard said quietly. I had to, Ethan replied. You owe me the truth. Richard leaned back, his voice low. I suppose I do. But the truth will not give you peace, Ethan. Your father was not perfect. He took what was mine, everything I built beside him, and he handed it all to you because of blood, not loyalty. Ethan shook his head. You were his son too. He raised you, trusted you, gave you everything a man could ask for. Richard's tone hardened, except his name. Silence filled the room, heavy and sharp. Richard continued. Do you know what it feels like to be loved as a replacement? To be almost chosen but never enough? I worked for years building this company while you were abroad, studying, traveling, living your perfect life. When I saw your father's will, I realized I had wasted my life chasing a family that never wanted me. Ethan's voice broke slightly. So you destroyed another one instead, the Rosewoods. Richard's eyes flickered. They were collateral. I needed the company to collapse so the shares could shift. It was business, Ethan. Nothing more. No, Ethan said firmly. It was personal. You destroyed people to heal a wound you refused to face. For the first time, Richard's expression cracked. He looked down at his hands, his voice almost a whisper. I thought if I could take everything from you, I would stop feeling empty. But when I finally had power, I realized it meant nothing. You cannot buy belonging. The guard signaled that time was almost up. Ethan stood, his voice steady but softer now. You were my brother, Richard. That will never change, no matter what you did. But I will not let you destroy anyone else. As he turned to leave, Richard said one last thing. You will never escape my shadow, Ethan. We are made from the same cracks. Ethan stopped at the door and looked back. Maybe, but I am choosing what to do with mine. When he stepped outside, the sunlight felt blinding. The air smelled of salt, reminding him of Eden Bay. He drove straight there, needing the quiet, needing her. Lillian was waiting at the edge of the garden, the ocean breeze tugging at her hair. She saw the weight in his posture and walked toward him. Did you see him? She asked. Yes, Ethan said. It is over. Her eyes searched his face. And you? I do not know yet, he admitted. It feels like I lost family twice, once when my father died, and again today. And she placed her hand on his chest, right over his heart. Then let the roses be your reminder that family is not just who we are born to. It is who we choose to stand beside. They walked slowly through the Rosewood Garden. The roses were in full bloom, their petals the size of small bowls, glowing gold and pink under the afternoon light. The air was warm, filled with the soft hum of bees and the sound of waves against the rocks. Ethan paused near the oldest rose bush, the one Lillian's grandmother had planted decades ago. Your family lost everything because of mine, he said quietly, and yet you still found a way to forgive. She smiled faintly. Maybe that is the only way to rebuild what was broken. For a long moment, neither spoke. The camera of the heart captured something simple but profound. The look of two people who had survived betrayal, pain, and loss, and somehow still found a reason to stay. The sun dipped lower, painting the horizon with shades of amber and rose. As they stood there, surrounded by the scent of flowers and salt air, the illusion of their fake marriage was long gone. What remained was fragile, uncertain, and beautifully real. And for Ethan Cole, a man who once measured everything by contracts and numbers, this was the first time he finally understood what it meant to belong not to a company, not to a legacy, but to another heart. The days after Richard's arrest moved slowly, like the calm after a long and violent storm. Reporters eventually left the gates of Cole Holdings. Investors quieted down, and the world began to move on. But inside Ethan Cole's mind, silence had become its own kind of noise. He had won, yet the victory felt hollow. The company was safe, but his family name had been scarred. The man he once called his brother now sat behind bars, and the empire they had built together felt empty without meaning. One evening, Ethan returned to Eden Bay, the place that had somehow become the only home he trusted. The sound of the ocean met him before he even stepped out of the car. The smell of roses drifted through the night air, thick and sweet, a reminder that some things could still grow again after being broken. Lillian was in the garden, kneeling beside a row of newly planted rose bushes. Her hands were covered in dirt, and a few petals were tangled in her hair. When she looked up and saw him, she smiled gently. You came back. I never really left, he said quietly. I just had to find my way through the smoke. He walked toward her, his shoes crunching softly over the gravel. The garden lights cast a warm glow around them, painting her face in gold. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Lillian said, I heard the news. Richard pleaded guilty. Ethan nodded. He did. He admitted to everything. The court will decide his sentence next month. Haven't? Lillian paused, pressing her hand against the soil, as if grounding herself. You must feel a lot of things right now. I do, he admitted. Anger, regret, but mostly pity. He spent his whole life trying to be part of something he already had. She looked at him softly. And you? He drew in a breath, the sound almost trembling. I have spent my whole life chasing perfection, controlling every outcome, calculating every step, but when it mattered most, I failed to see the truth standing right in front of me. Lillian's eyes glistened, reflecting the faint light. Ethan, you could not have known. He shook his head. No, but I could have listened. I could have believed in you sooner. She stood and brushed the dirt from her hands. It is not too late to start. For a while, They simply walked through the garden together. The night breeze carried the scent of roses, and the ocean whispered beyond the cliffs. The hotel lights flickered through the trees, warm and steady, like a heartbeat returning after years of silence. Ethan stopped near the old stone fountain. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small silver lighter, the same one his father had once owned. "My father used to say, fire is not just for destruction," he said. "It can also cleanse what needs to be reborn." He took out a folded piece of paper from his pocket. It was the last remaining copy of the marriage contract, slightly torn at the edges. Lillian's eyes widened. "You kept it?" "For a reason," he said. "Not as proof of what we were, but as a reminder of how far we have come." He lit the edge of the paper, and the flame caught quickly. They both watched as it curled and turned to ash, the embers drifting into the night sky. For a long time, neither spoke. When the fire was gone, Ethan whispered, "That contract wants to find everything between us. Now it means nothing." Lillian looked at him, her voice barely above a whisper. "Then what does define us now?" Ethan's eyes met hers, trust, and the chance to make something real. The wind carried the ashes across the garden, scattering them among the roses. Some of the petals caught a faint glow, as if touched by starlight. Ethan turned toward her, his expression softer than she had ever seen. "You once told me these roses bloom for those who love this place. Maybe they have been waiting for us." Lillian smiled through tears. "Then let us make sure they never stop blooming." He reached for her hand, and she did not pull away. For the first time, their fingers intertwined, not out of pretense, but out of quiet certainty. The ocean rolled in the distance, calm and endless, and the hotel stood behind them like a guardian of second chances. As the night deepened, a light drizzle began to fall, gentle and warm. It carried the scent of earth and renewal. Lillian looked up at the sky and whispered, "It feels like the world is forgiving itself." Ethan's voice was low, almost carried away by the wind. Maybe forgiveness is not something we are given. Maybe it is something we learn to give ourselves. And in that moment, surrounded by the ashes of what once was, they both understood their story had never been about contracts or betrayal. It was about two hearts learning to heal in the very place where everything had fallen apart. Spring arrived early that year. The ocean turned a softer shade of blue, and the scent of the roses drifted through every corridor of Eden Bay Hotel. The once faded landmark now stood renewed, its balconies filled with laughter, its lobby filled with the sound of guests checking in, and its heart beating again with life. On a quiet morning, Lillian stood on the terrace overlooking the garden. The sunlight spilled through the windows, catching the edges of her white dress. She had kept the hotel running during the months of reconstruction, turning each wing into a blend of old charm and quiet luxury. For her, it was not just business, it was redemption, a promise fulfilled for the generations before her. Behind her, the sound of footsteps approached. She turned to see Ethan walking toward her, holding 2 cups of coffee. The way he looked at her now carried no distance, no armor, only peace. "Good morning, Mrs. Rosewood," he said with a soft smile. She raised an eyebrow. "I thought I was Mrs. Cole." He handed her the cup and smiled again. "You are whoever you want to be, but if I am lucky, maybe you will be both." They stood side by side, watching the gardeners tend to the blooming roses. Each flower had grown fuller since the day they burned the contract. The petals shimmered in shades of pink, gold, and cream, so large they almost seemed unreal. Lillian touched one gently, her voice thoughtful. "My grandmother used to say these roses only bloom when love is real." Maybe she was right. Ethan looked out over the horizon. "Then I am grateful they waited for us." Later that day, the hotel staff gathered in the ballroom for the reopening ceremony. The mayor of the town spoke about restoration, legacy, and second chances. Guests clapped as the ribbon was cut, cameras flashed, and music filled the air. But Ethan barely heard the speeches. His eyes were on Lillian, the woman who had turned his world of contracts and control into something far more meaningful. When the crowd dispersed, he took her hand and led her outside to the garden, away from the lights and noise. The sun was setting, painting the sky in soft shades of coral and gold. The sea reflected the colors like glass. Ethan stopped by the old stone fountain, the one that had survived every storm. From his pocket, he took a small velvet box. Lillian froze, her breath catching as he opened it, to reveal a simple ring, a single rose-shaped diamond set in gold. "This time," he said, his voice low and steady, "there is no contract, No signatures, just my heart. She smiled through the tears that welled in her eyes. Ethan, are you sure? After everything, after all that pain? He nodded. Because of everything. Because pain taught me what love really means. The sound of the ocean filled the pause that followed. Lillian reached out, her fingers trembling slightly as she took the ring. Then let this be real. Not a deal. Not a rescue, just love. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and for a moment the world seemed to hold its breath. The wind carried the fragrance of the roses around them. The waves whispered against the rocks, and somewhere, the faint music of the ballroom drifted through the air like a memory of hope. Ethan looked into her eyes. I once thought I could control everything, but you taught me that the best things in life are the ones we cannot control at all. Lillian smiled softly. Maybe that is what love really is, a risk worth taking. Oh, they stood together as the last light of the sun faded into the sea. Behind them, the hotel lights began to glow, golden and warm. Guests laughed inside, unaware that in the garden outside, the miracle of Eden Bay had come full circle. As they walked hand in hand toward the entrance, a few rose petals drifted down from the archway above, landing at their feet like blessings. The hotel bell chimed softly in the distance, marking the beginning of a new hour, a new life. Lillian turned to look back one last time at the garden, the same place where she had once cried, once fought, once hoped. The roses were brighter now, alive under the moonlight. Ethan whispered, "The world keeps moving, but this place, it feels timeless." She nodded. Because love rebuilt it. And as they stepped inside, the doors of Eden Bay closed gently behind them, not as a farewell, but as a promise that even in a world of broken hearts and fading fortunes, love still finds a way to bloom again. The camera of life lingered on the roses swaying in the night wind, petals glimmering under the stars, whispering what the story of Eden Bay had always meant to say. Every ending can be a beginning, and every broken heart can be healed when love becomes real.